truth, not just the family, but we need the truth as well. We need to know exactly what happened here, because a black man was killed in police custody. He was on the floor in 43 seconds, face down, and there were 6 police officers. And when something like that happens, we need to ask serious questions.
This video is about the death in police custody of Sheku Bayoh, who died while being restrained by the police in Kirkcaldy in 2015. In the first section of the video, I'm going to show you a series of clips about the response to it from his family, so the BLM movement, political response within the Parliament. After then, I'm going to look at the facts of the matter, what actually happened here. And then I'm going to look at what's been going on in the public inquiry. They're still ongoing, but they're publishing their material online. We're going to have a look at that, see how the police officers involved are being treated in that. Then I'm going to sum up. Now, this is an issue where I haven't looked particularly hard. Maybe I've missed it, but I haven't seen anyone arguing back against this and saying, hang on a minute, there's something wrong going on here. But in the Scottish Family Party, it's often our job to speak the truth when no one else will. So just watch this.
No justice!
No peace!
No racist police! No justice!
No peace!
No racist police!
Lives matter!
From Minnesota to Kirkcaldy!
Black lives matter!
From Minnesota to Kirkcaldy!
Black lives matter!
After Sheku was restrained, within 32 seconds of the first police officers arriving, he was restrained on the ground. He was never ever to get up again. He was shackled, as Caddy said, like a slave. His body, motionless body, was taken into the ambulance. He was handcuffed, he was ankle cuffed, he had leg restraints applied. There was something like 24 separate lacerations, bruises, rib broken, and cuts to his body. His body was taken to the hospital and he was officially pronounced dead. The family then began a campaign for justice. And some 4 years later, they were denied that justice by the Lord Advocate, and they were told that there would be no charges brought. 5 years later, that was confirmed when the government announced a public inquiry. The family are asking for this inquiry to be robust, to be impartial, and to deliver the truth to this family, because they know without truth, they will never get justice. Our justice system in this country likes to talk about being colourblind. As far as Sheku Bayoh's family is concerned, Sheku's colour, the colour of his skin, his blackness was used as a weapon, and it was seen as a weapon, and the family believed that was as a result of that he received overwhelming force. We marched for George Floyd. If black lives actually matter in Scotland, then it requires all those hundreds, if not thousands of people that turned up for George Floyd, that turned up for solidarity with those who had died doing racial injustice in the United States, to now march in Scotland and to actually be here showing support and solidarity for Sheku Bayoh's family. They have been fighting for racial justice.
Mr Bayoh died in the course of an operation by police officers to restrain him, and I know the thoughts of members across the chamber will be with his family and friends at this difficult time. The First Minister and I met with the family today to express our deepest condolences. Let me be clear, Presiding Officer, for any independent scrutiny of this case to be rigorous and credible, it must address the question of whether or not Mr Bayoh's race played a part in how the incident was approached and dealt with by the police. In saying that, I am not prejudging the answer to that question. That will be for the inquiry, which will be independent of ministers.
I would like to associate myself and this party with the Cabinet Secretary's expression of deepest condolences to the family of Mr Bayoh.
And also offer my deepest sympathies to Mr Bayoh's family. It is shocking in modern Scotland, the circumstances in which Mr Bayoh has lost his life, and it's unacceptable that nobody has been held legally responsible.
As with others in the Chamber, our thoughts are with Mr Bayoh's family and friends.
I extend my condolences to family and friends of Sheku Bayoh.
As MSP for Kirkcaldy, can I once again express my condolences to Mr Bayoh's family and friends?
Presiding Officer, I too extend my condolences to the family and friends of Mr Bayoh.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I add my condolences to Mr Bayoh's family?
Presiding Officer, I met the family of Sheku Bayoh days after his death, and it was one of the most affecting meetings I've ever had as an MSP.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I place on record my condolences to the family as well?
Presiding Officer, my thoughts are with the family and friends of Sheku Bayoh, and I must also recognise the efforts of their legal team, in particular Amar Anwar, who has relentlessly pursued this case. I also welcome and thank the Cabinet Secretary for the announcement of a public inquiry today. While he's right to say that we can't definitively say that race was a factor in this case, there is no doubt that there is structural racism in Scotland.
The Lord Advocate has advised the Bayoh family that not one police officer or Police Scotland will face charges for the death of Sheku Bayoh.
I have been asked if Sheku have not come across the police, will he be alive today? Well, I believe he would be. I have asked the inquiry to please tell me how and why my brother have to die in the custody of the police.
So just to add to that response, the Edinburgh International Festival featured a play about Sheku Bayoh a few years ago, about his life and the way, racism basically, died in police custody, this sort of thing. Education Scotland, the government's education agency, published a video of literary assessment of the play, obviously used in schools to encourage schools to be using this material to present the story and address the issue in English lessons. So that's about the response to the story of Sheku Bayoh. Right, let's just have a look at what really happened. So, 3rd of May 2015, he died after being restrained by police in Kirkcaldy. 31 years old, I believe, training to be a gas engineer, father of 2 sons. So, early in the morning on 3rd of May 2015, he'd been watching a boxing match with some friends. They said he was acting oddly, so he left, went home, and there were reports from people in the vicinity that he'd got a knife, a large knife in the street, and was acting erratically. So neighbours, people in the vicinity were concerned, so they called the police, and the police turned up. 2 police arrived initially, 1 man and 1 woman, and they confronted Bayoh. They shouted, told him to, to stop, to stand still, get on the ground or whatever. He didn't. They ended up using pepper spray, batons, taking him to the ground, handcuffing him, wrists and ankles. Prior to his restraint, Bayoh assaulted a female officer, PC Nicole Short, chased her, struck her on the head, possibly knocked her unconscious, thereafter kicking and stamping on her as she lay. I mean, the report initially, he punched her in the back of the head. She fell to the ground. She tried to get up, and he stamped on her back to knock her back to the ground. In the inquiry, officers demonstrated evidence how Bayoh had violently stamped on PC Short, and it was later found by an expert that the marks on her back matched the mud on his shoes, sort of thing. So that's what happens. Bayoh lost consciousness soon after being restrained, and police were unable to resuscitate him at the scene. I mean, they tried, but they were unable to. An ambulance was called. He was pronounced dead on arrival at hospital later that morning. Post-mortem report revealed injuries to his face, bruising across the body, fractured rib. Those injuries, some of them, he was hit with a baton a few times, and also being on the ground, struggling. He struggled quite violently while he was on the ground. That resulted in some injuries. The fractured rib is thought probably was the way he fell, sort of fell on his arm when the police took him down. And the key fact also in his body were the drugs MDMA, which I looked into that one, not so significant, but also the drug known as Flakka. I'd never heard of that, but I'll tell you about that in a minute. So the cause of death was recorded as sudden death of a man intoxicated with drugs while under restraint. So the drug Flakka, I'd never heard of it. I'll just read you a few little snippets. I won't try and pronounce some of the words in here, but anyway, it can cause hyperstimulation, paranoia and hallucinations. Been reported to be the cause or a significant contributory factor in deaths and suicides by overdose, caused by combinations of drugs, linked to at least 1 death with pulmonary edema and moderately advanced coronary disease when it's combined with other drugs. Symptoms are known to easily escalate into frightening delusions, paranoid psychosis, extreme agitation, multitude of other altered mental states. Agitated delirium may occur, anxiety, agitation, violent outbursts, confusion, tachycardia, that's when your heart sort of goes crazy, hypertension. And so basically this can have quite a dramatic effect on the mind, but also on the heart and general bodily functions. That can be very dangerous and have resulted in death in a lot of recorded cases already. Right, moving on. So the police investigation. In the hours following his hospitalisation, the Police Investigations and Review Commissioner, PIRC, P-I-R-C, began an investigation into the circumstances surrounding Bayoh's death. After 16 months, it submitted its investigation to the Lord Advocate. The Lord Advocate gave his decision: no criminal, corporate or health and safety charges will be brought against the police involved. And in December 2018, the family requested a review of the decision after some more CCTV and mobile phone footage emerged. So the decision was reviewed in the light of the new evidence, and they still said no criminal proceedings against the police. Basically, they didn't see that the police had acted improperly in this case. That's 2 inquiries basically conducted by the police. In November 2019, though, the Scottish Government's Justice Secretary, a man called Humza Yousaf, decided to establish an independent public inquiry into his death, and Lord Bracadale was appointed, and that inquiry is expected to finish sometime next year. And you've seen something about that basically the race is a key part. We need to establish whether there was racism, because, well, we know Police Scotland's institutional racist. So the implication coming through, you hear the people talking in the Parliament. I mean, the campaigners are just saying the police is racist and this was racism. In the Parliament, they're saying the police are racist, and yeah, there sort of probably was. We really need to look into this. It might well have been. I mean, we can't prejudge, but it's quite. So that's generally the way it's leaning. That's why this public inquiry is happening. I mean, basically, if this had been a white man, this public inquiry would not be happening. It's happening because it was a black man, and they're suspecting, or in some cases hoping, to find some evidence of racism. So we're going to have a look at the inquiry in a minute. But you see, Humza Yousaf and Nicola Sturgeon met the family, and the family say, they want justice. I mean, justice. There's no evidence of any wrongdoing at the moment, so I'm not sure saying they're fighting for justice is appropriate. You've got like family members saying they don't feel safe on the street. Again, I'm not sure there's any justification for that at all. It's not like the police attacked someone minding their own business. They tackled someone who was presenting a very clear danger to people. The knife that people initially reported that he had, that seemed to have disappeared by the time the police arrived on the scene. So the police received the phone calls. 2 police officers, 1 man, 1 woman, got on the scene initially. And you'll hear about what happened there. I mean, they challenged him, he refused to respond. The male police officer used his spray on him, but he just continued to be sort of angry and aggressive. He charged at the man, so missed him, went for the woman instead. The woman ran away, police woman ran away, so Bayoh chased her and sort of hit her on the back of the head, knocked her down, stamped on her when she tried to get up. I mean, in the inquiry, the doctor that dealt with the injury on the head. She said she couldn't see any injuries on her back, but she was wearing a flak jacket. But, with anything, there's any sort of gap where they can try and suggest there's something wrong with the evidence, they're going to go for it. And that's what the media chooses to report on. I mean, but his foot was on her back. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And she couldn't get up. Anyway, so that was going on there. I mean, the male police officer thought that, wasn't sure if she was alive or dead when she was on the floor. So Bayoh was then coming at him, and then reinforcements arrived because the police put out a general, if you're anywhere near, just get to this place straight away. So police started to arrive to help out. There were about 6 on the scene by the end of it. Again, in the inquiry and from the family, there's sort of the suggestion that 6 police officers, that's too many. That's bullying, that's overpowering, that's racism. You don't need that many police officers. I mean, if one police officer's on the ground unconscious and another one's basically being attacked, you get every police officer you can available there. I mean, to suggest that that's too many is, well, anyway. Then he was restrained. Again, you'll hear you will have heard they'll say, there were 6 to 9 police officers restraining him. Well, it was 6. And they make it sound like they all jumped on top of him and crushed him. But you can see in the CCTV footage, there was nothing like that at all. They were just doing what was necessary to handcuff him and to put leg restraint on, because he was fighting very, very aggressively. It was a very strong, muscly guy, and it took a lot of people to restrain him. Now, what we'll see in the inquiry footage is the officers being questioned about this. Still 7 years later, they've been through 2 inquiries already. This is the 3rd one, and you will see that the ethos, the approach within it, is basically the police officers are in the dock. they're like the accused. They are effectively being accused of racism, and they're having to defend themselves from a charge of racism. I mean, the female officer was there. I mean, she just got attacked and punched and knocked more or less unconscious and stamped on a bit. So I don't think anyone's accusing her of racism. I don't think. But the man who was with her, who I would suggest probably saved her life, he's been accused of racism. And the questioning within this, the question is often, where was your left hand? Where was his right hand? Where was the other officer's right hand? Was it the sort of things that it's really difficult to remember. It's very technical. You probably can't remember very well. But if you go into more and more detail, you can make people sound a bit vague, and maybe people don't quite remember the same thing when you've gone into this really fine detail of something that happened 7 years ago. So there's that sort of effect as well. You'll hear in the questioning in the inquiry as well, they're asking these police officers, basically, what were you scared about? Was there really a threat? I mean, in one passage, it's quite bizarre. I mean, the police have arrived to report of a man behaving aggressively and erratically with a big knife. And they say, you came in a big transit van, you had a flashing light. What was there to be worried about? Why were you so worried? Well, obviously, they were worried about getting stabbed or attacked by someone who was behaving violently. You get a question like, so when you arrived on the scene, one police officer's unconscious on the ground, the other ones had been attacked. Why didn't you try and talk to the man instead? Is it not racism? Is that why you didn't talk to him? Because you're a racist? That's the sort of line of questioning you will hear. So they're constantly probing, did you do something differently because of his race? They haven't got any evidence that they did at all, but that's what the inquiry is about. That's what they sort of want to find. That's what I would suggest, hoping to find. That's what the family want. It seems to be that's what the political establishment is sort of quite leaning towards. That was sort of quite keen to find as well. And you get questions as well. How much equality and diversity training did you do? Were you taught about unconscious bias, etc.? So cheers, while you're listening to this next section, these sections from the inquiry, the way I would think about it is the police often rush towards things that we all rush away from. Like if there's a man with a knife behaving erratically and aggressively in the street, I get away. The police's job is to go towards it and deal with that situation, which is very brave and admirable. And in this case, this is what they did. Who knows what would have happened if they hadn't done it? Maybe some other people would have been killed. Who knows what would have happened? But 8 years later, they're still having to account for their actions. They're still under the microscope. They're still under suspicion of being racists. And you can see from the earlier clips, there's a lot of people who want these police officers to be prosecuted. I mean, one of the MSPs who spoke, he basically said, this is outrageous that no one's faced charges for this. Anna Sawa, leader of the Scottish Labour Party, was taking the same sort of line as well. And the family's definitely taking that sort of line. They're saying, some police officer needs to be locked up for what's happened. Well, let's see what's going on in the inquiry then.
Were you still shouting at the time that you were spraying?
Yeah, I would have been shouting continually. I don't know exactly what words, but it's drilled into you when you do your OST. It's get back, step back, or stop what you're doing, get on the floor. And it would have been a reiteration of kind of those, having issued already the command that if you don't stop what you're doing, I'll spray.
So you're shouting and getting no reaction. You've sprayed and got no reaction.
Yeah.
Was there any reaction from Mr. Bayoh to any of the things you were doing?
No, but he did eventually turn and basically face me and Nicole.
What caused him to turn?
I don't know if it was the shouting or maybe the feeling. I don't know what caused him to turn, but I kind of thought at that point I had his attention at least.
And you've said he turned to you and PC Short?
Yeah, I don't necessarily, again, know where exactly she was, but I had an awareness that she was close by behind me. So in turning to look at me, it was also would have been facing PC Short as well.
When he turned to face you, tell us what you could see. Describe him for us.
He's basically just, I think I've described it in my original statement as a I don't even know if I could reproduce it with my own face to give you an idea, but he just looked at us, and my kind of fear at that point was that he was maybe sizing us up, or because I'd spread him, you know, he was looking at me, and now his attention was solely focused on me. But that gave me obviously, I'd achieved what I'd wanted to achieve in that I'd got his attention, and I thought that would allow me then to start communicating with him, but he wasn't saying anything, still wasn't responding, he was now just looking. And basically I thought we were going to get attacked.
You used the word sizing us up, and then you said me. What do you mean by that?
Like, if somebody's gonna have a fight or gonna get close to somebody, you kind of like look them up and down, and almost taking, I think, to your mind, kind of how maybe big a person is, how, you know, what am I up against almost. I don't know if that's what I kind of mean by the phrase like sizing up, so taking in who I am as a person now.
And you say you got his attention and you thought that might allow you to communicate. At that stage, when you say it might allow you to communicate, were you still thinking about the possibility that you could converse with him or speak to him?
That's always on your mind throughout, kind of running throughout this. You know, if there's a way to end this by conversation, then absolutely, that's what I want.
What would you have needed his response to be to allow you to engage in that communication?
Just anything, and you know, he could have said anything to me, or it could have just been him just standing there for an extended period of time, allowing me then to, you know, try and build some sort of rapport with him. Is there anything I can do to help you? Like, what's going on? You know, things like that would have been my probably go-to phrases, but I wasn't afforded that opportunity because he then decided to charge.
So even at that stage, after you'd used your CS spray, you still would have been willing to communicate?
Yeah.
You then say he decided to charge. Tell us what happened then.
He basically ran from his position at 3 to my position at 1, and I actually thought he was running at me. So, because fearing that I was going to be attacked, I put my parva back in its holder. I must have got quite lucky because there's only a small clip to get your parva to slide on back to its holder, and then I drew my baton initially as a defensive kind of mechanism, but I remember being confused because he seemed to veer off to my right, and I was a bit confused as to what was going on, and the fact that he hadn't attacked me, and I basically pivoted 180 on my feet, so basically instead of looking north on as you look at the image, I was then kind of looking almost south, or in a general south direction, and I seen him basically running after PC shot.
What force did he use?
From where I was standing, a lot, because it knocked her like so off balance that she's fallen forward. So I would imagine to do that would require a lot of force.
When you pivoted, describe what you saw.
What I saw was Mr. Bayoh strike PC short with his fist to the back of her head. She wasn't wearing a hat, so that impact would be fist on head. So it was the back of her head, and that action caused her to fall or lose balance, and she fell forward onto the road.
When he kept not listening to me and he kept like coming towards me, and I was giving him clear commands to stay away from me, and I would then say that point where he came within a kind of arm's width of me, I can only describe it as me being like completely overwhelmed by terror. I felt his presence behind me, like I just knew he was right behind me, and I was running, and then I just remember feeling what I've always described it as this almighty blow to the back of my head, just at my ear, and then I tried to stay on my feet, but I just couldn't.
When Mr. Bayoh had punched PC short, she's fallen down on the floor. What I remember is she's tried to push herself up, but then he stamped on her back, which has caused her to basically I thought he killed her.
Tell us how she tried to push herself up.
Using her hands.
And did she succeed in doing that?
No.
What happened when she tried to do that?
He stamped on her again. I honestly thought he'd killed her. Or was in the process of killing her. So because I had my baton out, I used my baton to deliver a blow. I deemed that the only option I had was to use my baton, because if I'd have ran, I think I would have probably ended up. My fear was if I'd fallen, I'm on the floor as well, and the floor is not a safe place to be. When you're dealing with something like that, you can't run away. And trying to strike a leg isn't an option, because that's moving about again, the arms moving about, and I want him to stop, so I struck him in the head area.
When you say the first strike didn't stop him, what was he doing at that point?
Well, I think this first strike, obviously, it was timed so that, just a coincidental timing, that he wasn't actually stomping on her, but it didn't move him away from her, it didn't cause him to fall, it didn't cause him to turn around, and my fear was that he was going to do it again, so I didn't want to gamble on the what if, so I delivered 2 more strikes, and that was enough to cause him to basically turn around and look at me and do that.
So he turned towards you?
Yeah.
What was PC Short doing at that moment?
She wasn't moving.
Had she remained on the ground?
Yeah.
You arrive with PC Walker, who's 25 stone. You're 17 stones at the time, and you're both 6'4". So Mr. Bayoh was shorter and lighter than both of you.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a knife visible. And you're obviously both there in your full uniform, with your equipment, with a big transit van with flashing lights. And you're trained, you're experienced officers. Can I ask, what were your concerns when you arrived at the time?
That he did still have a knife, and that he was going to go on to use it again, as he had done a few minutes beforehand.
Arriving as you did, how realistic do you feel those concerns were at the time?
Very, very realistic.
And if Mr. Bayoh had been white when you arrived, it was a white man that you saw there with no knife, would you still have considered the need to issue immediate commands and then use your spray?
100%.
Looking back now, you don't think you could have given him more time or spoken to him? Or
No, I would have done nothing different.
Right. And had you attended incidents prior to the 3rd of May 2015 where someone was suffering from a mental health crisis or under the influence of drink or drugs? Had you used your communication skills with that person?
Every other day of my working life.
But not on this occasion?
It wasn't the time or the place.
And the distinction for this event was what? Why is it different on this occasion?
Because it was corroborated that he was using the knife. He was causing, but he was potentially causing harm to members of the public and their cars. That, from my first sightings of him, I formed the opinion that he was on drugs, that he had the physical capability to continue causing damage.
And that's what was the difference
That was
for
the
you?
difference,
What role, if any, do you think his race played in the way you decided how to handle this situation?
Nothing whatsoever.
What difference did his race make, if any, about the choices that you made, tactical choices?
Nothing whatsoever.
Looking back now, do you think he appeared to you to be a greater potential threat because he was black?
No, because you get muscly, big guys out their face on drugs with knives that are white.
If he'd been white, would you have viewed him as someone potentially less violent or less likely to resist?
No.
Or more compliant?
No.
If he'd been white, would you have been willing to try speaking to him, communicating?
I did try and speak to him.
Is that the commands that we've talked about
Yeah.
earlier? What I'm thinking is, if he had been white, would you have been more inclined to ask him if there was a problem, or how was he, or had he got any sharp implements?
No, I was taking control of the situation. I wasn't there to have a conversation with him.
And can I ask you about training? You'll know that I've asked a lot of officers about their training, and I've asked them about equality and diversity training that they'd had. And many have given evidence about getting training at Tully Allen. Is that something that you had?
21 years ago. I believe I had it during my my times up at Tully Allen. I also had a diversity training day up at Fife headquarters, probably around about 2014 or something like that. You'd have to check my scope records, but yeah, that's the two sort of training packages I've had.
And the training that you had the year before, May 2015, do you remember if you were taught anything about unconscious bias?
What is unconscious bias?
Were you asked any questions about maybe making assumptions about people because of the colour of their skin? You're not even really aware of those assumptions, and you're treating people in a certain way, just unconsciously?
No.
Were you asked about that?
No, not that I can recall.
Do you remember being asked to identify any biases that you yourself have?
Can't remember anything about any of the training.
No. And then, did they teach you, about bias at all in 2014, and maybe how to guard against that? To avoid treating people and making assumptions which weren't correct?
I'm sure it did, but I can't really recall any specifics.
Okay. Do you make any assumptions, or in 2015 did you make any assumptions?
No, I treat everybody the same.
And in relation to Mr. Bayoh, did you make any assumptions about him because he was black?
No, not at all.
Had you ever come across any examples of discriminatory behaviour in Kirkcaldy Police Office by 2015?
No.
Had you ever heard any racist jokes or comments?
No.
By your colleagues?
Nope.
And any of the colleagues that were with you on the 3rd of May 2015 exhibited any behaviour of that sort to you?
The incident on the 3rd of May 2015 was not in the slightest bit racist. There was nothing done, nothing said, either at the locus, back at the canteen, in the days that followed, in the weeks that followed, in the months that followed. There was nothing at all racially motivated or racially said with racial connotations.
So even back in the canteen, nothing discussed about race?
Nothing at all.
In 2015, were you aware of concerns about, public concerns about the use of force by police officers, particularly against black men?
No.
So those police officers, let's remember that there's a substantial number of people, including the family and other activists and the people shouting, you know, racist police outside the inquiry. And it seems within the Parliament as well, there's people who agree with them, but there are people who want to see those police officers, or some of them, prosecuted, maybe sent to prison because of what they did. Now, let's say those police officers, or some of them, got carried away in the heat of the moment. They're a bit rougher than they need to be. They used a bit more force than was actually necessary. Let's say that had happened. I haven't seen a shred of evidence that that was the case. Not at all. But even if that was the case, then you'd still have the next hurdle would be to show that that was racially motivated in some way. Race played a part in it. But they haven't even done the first bit, let alone the second. But of course, now that Police Scotland's declared itself to be institutionally racist, I suppose you can see how people think. Well, you can just assume if Police Scotland is racist, its officers must be racist, mustn't they? So we can just take that for granted, that racism was a big factor in it. But as far as I can see, not a shred of evidence at all. Now, the conclusion of this report, I can tell you what's going to be in it. One thing that's going to be in it already, that's going to be that police need to focus more on equality and diversity training, because the officers involved didn't seem to have had enough of it. That will be a nice, easy thing to put in the report, won't it? Right, how about the family? Well, I quite understand that they're upset, obviously. And, you know, they're going to remember the best of the person. That's absolutely normal. And they'll show some sort of loyalty to him as well. Okay, that's absolutely fine. They'll want to know what happened, want to know the truth. Again, that's absolutely understandable as well. To say things like, would he still be alive if they hadn't have interacted with the police? Well, maybe, but maybe someone else would have been dead. Let's face the facts. If he was being violent, possibly with a knife, very aggressive, if the police hadn't challenged him, maybe he'd have killed someone else. It's quite possible. I mean, one of his relatives using the term, he was shackled like a slave. I mean, how transparent can you get? That really is an appeal to the a black activist mentality, isn't it? You know, bring up the connection with slavery. The fact that the police put handcuffs and leg restraints on a man who is attacking them and being extremely violent and aggressive to suggest that's somehow linked to slavery, well, to be honest, that is outrageous. To try and make that connection is absolutely outrageous. And anyone who can't see through that, well, I would really question their judgment. This idea is blackness was used as a weapon against him. Again, absolute nonsense. What does that even mean? He was violently attacking a police officer and he was restrained. Okay, blackness was used as a weapon? No. They say, you know, he was walking along the road when this happened to him. I would say that's pretty close to being a lie. It's a deliberate attempt to present an inaccurate version of what happened. It was not just walking along the road when this happened to him. Now, I think the family, if this happened to someone within your family, how would you feel? You'd probably be a bit embarrassed about it, a bit ashamed about it, that someone in your family's behaved like this, that has done this. Okay, you know, you're going to be upset, you're going to remember the best of him. But what's happening in this case is the family is being used by activists. Activists have taken hold of them and say, right, you suit our political agenda, so we're going to use you, we're going to use this issue to advance our cause. And when the family are basically saying they want to see the police officers punished, I would say they're wrong. They're wrong. The police officers were basically... Bayoh was in the wrong in his behaviour. The police officers were in the right in trying to restrain him and stop him from what he was doing. So, yeah, in wanting to see them punished, they are just wrong. Now, if you want to blame someone for this, I would say to the family, if you want to blame someone for this, you're looking in the wrong direction. It's not the police that should be blamed. It's the drug dealer. It's the drugs. Now, people on the sort of hard left of politics, they're often very anti-police. and they're very big on racism. So when something like this happens, it's racism and it's the police racism. That's what they automatically turn to. I would say, what's actually the cause of this? The cause of this whole sequence of events was drugs. It was drug abuse. So if those drugs weren't available, this wouldn't have happened. Now, people say, if you liberalise drugs, probably the same people who are saying it's the racist police, they're the same people who want to legalise all drugs. Because it's just free choice. If someone wants to take this drug, then that's just up to them. They should be free to be able to make that decision if they want to. Well, I say no, they shouldn't be free to make that decision. That's the mistake that Bayoh made, was take this drug. So whoever supplied it, who has been involved in that supply chain, they're all responsible for the way this turned out. Now, I'd say personally, if I'm ever attacked by someone and the police come along to intervene, to be honest, I hope it's not a black man who's attacking me. And the reason for that is when the police come along, if it's a black man, I fear that the police will think, oh no, all right, we've got to be extra careful here. If I get this slightly wrong, or even if I don't get it wrong, I could, the next 8 years of my life might be destroyed. It might be an appalling experience for me. I'd rather just back off. Okay, if the bloke that's been attacked, okay, if he ends up a bit more seriously injured, well, okay, that's unfortunate. But I'm not going to take the risk of challenging and restraining a black man. It's just too risky. I daren't do it. And that is going to be the inevitable effect of this whole inquiry, the whole campaign related to it. That's what it's going to do. That's what it's going to plant in the minds of police officers in Scotland. I remember years ago hearing a police marksman being interviewed on the radio, and he was a marksman for about, 25 years or something. So we'd been paying him to have his gun and training him, shooting, etc. He decided after about a year in the job that he was never going to shoot anyone. He said if he was ever in a situation where he was told to shoot someone, he would deliberately miss. Because he knew the moment you shoot someone, your life is destroyed. You've got to go through years of, you're suspended, you go through inquiries, and it's just so appalling that he decided he was just never going to actually shoot anyone. So who's institutionally racist here? Well, I think there's a pretty good case to suggest that the government is institutionally racist. If Bayoh had been a white man, this would have been forgotten long ago, as many similar incidents are. But instead, you've got the sort of Black Lives Matter type mentality campaigners, and they're on the alert. They're looking for an issue to take up. So a black man dies in police custody, right, they're on it. This is our opportunity. This is our chance to advance our cause. And that's what's happened. I think ultimately the really sad thing about it is you end up with this situation where it's not about right and wrong. I mean, when I look at this, I want to be on the side of the people who are doing the right thing, not the people who are doing the wrong thing. But there's an awful lot of people, it seems, who don't look at it that way. They look at it as an issue of black and white. They're on the side of black because black is good, white is bad. So you're going to be on the side of black. Whereas I say, I think if a society heads in that direction, that is very, very dangerous when morality comes second to race.